Dan Elzer, welcome to Dash's Breaking Ground. What a great opportunity. So excited to chat with you today. Uh, uh, it appears to me that from what I can gather, you've just about done everything in residential, well, in real estate. And I know that it's been a glorious career, but just to tee it up, just kind of give us the kind of the overview in the few decades you've been you you, you know, focusing on your career and its import.
Certainly, Len. Well, first of all, thank you very much, and to everyone listening, it's an honor to be a guest on your program here. And my background, I got into the real estate business in 1987. So I came in when things were, they make today look like a fun day compared to
Yeah.
when I came into this business. And I kind of went quick, Len. I came out of law enforcement, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur, so I basically sold everything I owned. I wrote a business plan and went to some angel investors, and they backed me to open a company. So I came out of law enforcement, jumped in, got my real estate license. I did my 12 months as a sales associate back then so I could sit for the broker's exam. And literally 14 months after getting into the business, I opened a company. Now, when you read my bio, I built that into an amazing company, very profitable company. We sold it. Everyone did great. I moved on into consulting and into content development, design, and a bunch of other things. But I always like to share with the group. It's not a straight line to the top, as I know you're well aware. You and I talked off camera, if you will. My first 18 months in the business, although I jumped in and got my license, got my broker's license, opened an office, I didn't know what I was doing, and literally almost went bankrupt at about the 19th month. I had my investors threatening to close me down and fire me. And I learned very quickly that I didn't know a lot of stuff. Even though I had a success in law enforcement, my career there was incredibly successful. I came into this business and I failed miserably. And I always like to share the three things that caused me to fail, if you
Sure,
don't mind. Uh,
please.
One was,
Only three, huh?
well, in 37 years, I've boiled it down to three.
Okay.
The first one was I always tell people I had that's not me disease. Every time someone tried to teach me something, I ran it through my head and went, that's not me. So I didn't do it. Second reason was I was my own boss. And for anyone out there that's an entrepreneur or a independent contractor, whether you're new or experienced in this business, when we came from other businesses, we had to do things. And if we didn't like it, we just went home and complained to our spouse or our friends, but we did it. And I learned in hindsight that this was huge. I was my own boss. I didn't understand the responsibility of that. So whenever the things got tough or I didn't want to do something, I just chose not to do it. And then the third reason I failed was I didn't master anything. And now being a executive coach and skills and tactic person in the marketplace, mastery to me is that ability to duplicate any skill or strategy on demand without hesitation. And I knew a bunch of stuff, but I didn't have anything mastered. And so when I look back on my career, if I would have taken the same focused approach as I did to law enforcement, day one getting into real estate, my first 18 months would have been amazing. But to finish off the resume, after getting it figured out, built one heck of a company that we didn't even put it up for sale. Someone came and made an offer to buy us.
Yeah.
And my investors wanted to take that opportunity. And then I moved into consulting, executive coaching. I did go a stint, 13 years as a infill multifamily developer and custom home builder. That's an interesting business to be in. And then I also opened up a green screen broadcast studio for 10 years. So I've been kind of all over the place, but my heart and my roots are deeply embedded in the real estate industry, along with development and commercial and residential.
Well, yeah, that's why I was so interested in having this conversation with you today. Today's theme is about new development, and
Yes.
it's a challenging, exciting, sexy business to be in, and with all the vagaries that bring with it. Um, how would you begin to help define for the audience the this new development cycle? Specifically, now we're talking about South Florida, and
Right.
we certainly over the last let's just say 25 years, not even further, but 25 years, the ups and downs, and what has triggered today or within the recent past all of this development activity?
Well, there's a couple things that strike me immediately about it. One, you said it; it's sexy. Okay, it's something that is when you're the person involved, either the developer with that dream, the company that gets the on-site opportunity, or the sales professional that's sitting in the design room. It is sexy, So you have that feeling of I'm doing something very special. The challenge that comes with that, though, in my opinion, is you're dealing with a high-end net worth person, and you're usually dealing in a want, not a need. So I don't need to go to South Florida and buy a multi-million-dollar place. If I'm going to do it, I want to do it. And so when you look at the traditional sales approach, you have the headwind of, if I don't know how to develop that client properly and value proposition them properly, then I will feel kind of fish out of water and be in an order taking mode, because I'm like, well, I can't create urgency. They don't have to have this. Well, that's wrong. You know, the beauty of new construction in a high end marketplace is, if you understand, I call it winning differences, Len. If I understand the winning differences of the project I'm on, and I know how to properly diagnose and ask the right questions, I can get people that can't sleep at night without wanting to buy it.
Mm.
So for me, I think, coming through a boom market that we had, there was so much order taking going on, and then just the realization that this is not a must purchase for most people. I just think that throws a lot of challenges into uh, the actual sale of that project.
So let's talk a little bit about the psychology of want and need and the triggers that you've observed and have also shared with so many agents along the way in helping them understand um, the distinct difference between want and need, especially when you're talking to high net worth individuals who, generally speaking, have kind of been to the dance on multiple occasions,
Yes.
and they're, generally speaking, well informed. But the psychology of that is really an interesting topic. Can you kind of dig a
Yeah.
little bit deeper into that?
Well, I'm going to start with another consultant that I work with very closely. Um, he gave me this phrase I'm going to use. And I tell him, forever I'll give him credit for this, because it used to take me about 15 minutes, Len, to explain the importance of diagnosing, the importance of discovery, the importance of, if I'm speaking about something that doesn't matter, I'm going to lose, especially a high net worth person. And he had a great quote that went, treatment before diagnosis is malpractice. And think about that a second. Think how often in our industry, in real estate, there's assumptions made, or even worse, you start to speak and I end up visualizing in my head my own desires, and I lay them upon you because I think I understand. And so the psychology of need versus want, to me, for a sales professional, is, can I get to the core of what the want is about?
Mm,
A need will drive you. If I need shelter, by God, I'm going to find shelter. If I need a bigger house because my wife's pregnant, I'm going to find a bigger house. But if I'm sitting on 2 properties, 3 properties, and I want to explore South Florida, that is a definite want. So the psychology comes down to, can I understand you well enough to position something about being in South Florida to cause your brain to go, that is the best option for what I'm trying to do right now, or it's
mm,
the only option for what I'm trying to do right now. And I think people discount way too much that want isn't a strong enough driver. I think it's an incredible driver. It's just that if we speak to it in generalities, or we don't get to the core, then the person has to sort it through their own brain. They have to sit there and go, okay, you gave me a lot of stuff, pretty brochures. Does this really fit where I'm trying to do? And I think that's where people think there's this heavy psychology in it. No, you just didn't meet the customer where the customer was.
yeah. So, so on that topic, it's kind of like knowing your customer really becomes no small part of that equation. And I wonder, in your formula, recognizing and identifying who's sitting across the table from me, their wants, their needs, their interests, whether, they like tennis or golf or this or that, they have 3 kids or their grandparents, whatever, understanding the individual that you're talking to. How do you counsel your associates in terms of getting the backstory, as it were,
There you go.
finding the essence of.
Exactly. And Len, I mean, you've been in these projects, and I've been in them. I developed much smaller than what's down in South Florida, but uh, I want to say there's 3 factors to discovery. One is the environment in which I've been given. That environment of the sales center or wherever I am to be able to start that engagement. That's number one. Number two is, am I talking to a gatekeeper or am I talking to a principal? And I
Mm,
think that is huge.
yeah.
And then the third, I always have to take into consideration my client, which is the developer. Now, I say this, any developers listening, I say this with all the love in my heart to you. But if you hired me to consult with you, developers, like salespeople, can get focused on the wrong thing that can hinder sales. And so I want to make sure that my developer understands that my approach is might go down a road that you're not happy with to begin with, but it will conclude with where you want me to be.
Mm,
And so sometimes salespeople will move into what I call feature dumping about a project
yeah.
instead of the discovery. So let me just give a common scenario. You come to the center. We're set up. Most centers are set up to demonstrate product, right? I mean, there's pretty stuff and there's different areas to walk you through. And if I immediately go into that, I will find myself dumping on you. I'll be going, and here's another thing we do, and another thing we've provided, and we went with this designer and this level of material. But I don't know anything about you. So again, I might be talking about things that don't matter.
Yeah.
So I always like to say, traditional sales, I'd sit you down and do a discovery. We would sit across the conference table. But if I don't have that opportunity, the way that my uh, design center set up or my market center set up, then I have to segment it. So when we first come in, I'm going to do generalized questions. I'm going to just identify some simple things. What brought you here? How familiar are you with the developer or with the product or the project? Have you experienced this type of opportunity before in pre-selling a construction product? I want to get a little bit of base knowledge on you. From that, I want to move you into the demonstration. Because in the demonstration, Len, I can talk about if the demonstration has a part of it that addresses lifestyle.
Mm,
Instead of me just telling you about the lifestyle, I can ask you what's most important. What are the things you're looking to accomplish? Is there anything in past experiences that you want to avoid? And when you give me those parameters, I can now turn you to whatever pretty things I have and demonstrate that part of this project to touch what you're looking for or to overcome what you're worried might happen. And this is going back to what we talked about, maybe getting into some objections. I
yeah.
believe most salespeople drive objections by poor presentation, where proper presentation with proper discovery eliminates the majority of objections that come at the end of the presentation. So
So I've perfectly understood and well said. Today, the advantage that buyers and sellers have is that the access to content, to anybody's individual background, their
yep,
careers, their family, is so much more readily available than it was 15, 20 years ago.
yes,
So you would imagine that agents have a running start,
yes,
or at least should have a running start if they've
should.
done a little bit of their homework. So sharing, pretty pictures and fancy sales centers are really, so much of what's going on today. And it almost seems here in South Florida, the newer projects that are really high end showcase, multi-million dollar sales centers with extraordinary finishes. And yet, with so many of them seem to be, appearing now, and in most, in the most magnet-driven locations on the beach, on the bay, downtown, where all the activity is. How do you think that developers need to help help the sales process. I mean, look, these guys have put it all on the line. They're dreamers as well.
Yes.
I've found in my career working with so many different developers in so many different parts of the country and outside of the country. These guys, these men and women are kind of cut from a whole different cloth. They are unique and very, very special, and can be brilliant and insightful, well-educated, petty, jealous, nuts,
Fearful, insecure. I mean, all those things.
all of the above. How do agents? How do you talk with your agents and help them along the way of kind of figuring out after the prospect is in the sales center, so they're in the web, and now the agent's job is to somehow through intel, through intelligence, through knowing what the heck they're doing and what the comp sets are in this particular community. How do you get them to go from I might be interested buyer to, let's kind of talk about some real nitty gritty stuff to get down to a sale?
Um, there's a lot in what you just asked there, and I'm going to give you a couple thoughts on it. One, I think that there's not enough discovery of the developer.
That's interesting.
And to my leaders, to my sales leaders, we have to be the conduit for that. Because if I have a developer, I mean, I didn't build skyscrapers, but I built some very beautiful things up here in Central Florida, and infill projects, in these really nice communities up here. And I had winning differences. I had things that I believed the salesperson need to point out because it differentiated me. What I had to do was take a step back, though, and use my sales hat and go, but someone might be here to purchase it for something that I don't find as appealing. Yeah, they love my designer, they love my this, but to them it's more functional or it's more something else. So I have to, as a developer, I have to be careful not to handcuff my sales team's ability to explore. And I think that is a conversation between the company that takes on the on-site role and the developer. But then if I was in that spot right now and you were the developer, I would come to you and say, the next thing I want to do, Len, is I want to have my sales team do a discovery on you. I just want you to sit back and only answer what you're asked, because I want them to learn you organically. And then I would put my sales team in front of you and have them discover and really learn your emotions and your drivers and stuff. Once I have that done, now let's move into the sales center. Now you understand my salespeople. They can discover, ask questions. You don't have fears, those triggers.
Sure.
And my salespeople look at you as a human being. Yeah, you're the brains and the money and the vision behind this. But there's now a relationship where they won't make mistakes as salespeople, thinking I better do what the developer wants or else. I see that all the time. I experienced it myself. Sure. So now when you're there as the customer, again, let's say we have the decision maker. I want everyone to realize that I don't know what will make you buy until you disclose it.
Okay.
And that could happen, my friend, at the talking about the landscape and the cityscape that I have and what is the environment like for a lifestyle. I might find that spot, and then I'll make sure I weave that through every part of the rest of the presentation. But I might get to where we're maybe into a model or into one of the, if there's some completed floors, we're into something, and it's there. I all of a sudden find, here it is. But what I don't want to have happen is for a salesperson to get into a routine of making sure they tell you everything that's in the sales center, to not be listening for the why, to be able to answer it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but those are the things that I see as a challenge.
What I want to unpack in something you just said is kind of interesting to me. I've always kind of thought the following, that not every developer is for every on-site brokerage firm.
Correct.
They're just not. They're just not. And yet, I understand the triggers for on-site development brokerage firms to go chase lots of projects and to land as many as they possibly can. And they're the legitimate ones that have been doing it for a long time. What I like about what you're getting at here is that I think that truly there should be an interview process from both sides of the lens. That it's one thing for a developer to share a vision and provide all of the components of a project, branded, a hotel, whatever, all the rest of it. Star architect and interior designers of global note, and on and on and on. And yet, what I find to be interesting is that developers and who they sometimes wind up, or many times wind up selecting, are not a good fit. Their psychologies, their point of view, their strategies are different, and that difference really begins to demonstrate and reveal itself when they get to the sales process. So I like that thinking, but I'm not sure, and maybe you could share. Um, do you think that happens enough? Do you think that vetting on both sides of the table goes on enough?
No, no. And I think that's, as a consultant, I've come into scenarios where people will say to me, we'll start talking about the proper process of engagement, and they'll say, ooh, well, but the developer wants. And I'll look at them and I'll go, okay, the developer is an amazing person, obviously, but do they understand professional selling to the point that if we skip this part, we're going to be at odds? And I've had people say, we really haven't had that conversation with them. And that's why I brought it up on our
Yeah.
talk today, because
Mm.
I think that is a huge bridge to get to a collaborative approach to selling out the darn product. Now, I'm going to use my wife as an example. My wife is an interior designer. She has a very high-end eye. But when it comes to lifestyles, she has it's called hypersonic hearing. She has a hearing challenge in processing that enrages her. So people miss that all the time in interviewing us when they're trying to sell us stuff. And so they'll put my wife in a position where she immediately is quiet and fearful that we can't do this because her hypersonic hearing will be triggered. Now, if the salesperson is doing the job, they'll discover that through asking questions, because my wife will share it as her guard goes down. And when I find great salespeople, that comes out. And when that comes out, now if we're looking at a condo on the beach or something, they start to ask questions around that. Well, where would you feel comfortable to be? What would need to be in place? So then when they go demonstrate the product, they hit her right where she lives. Everyone has something, Len, you know this. You've been doing this a long time. I need to know what that something is. And I don't think that we spend the time to discover that out of fear of making sure we talk about the greatness of every project. And every project probably has the solve for what that person wants, not needs, wants. But if I don't get to what they want and solve it, then I'm stuck in the loop of, okay, Len came in, then his accountant came in, and now I'm having a hard time getting in touch with them. I hear that one all the time. I go, well, you're having a hard time being in touch with them because your value proposition fell short of selling their want. If you hit their want, they'd be asking more questions. They'd be back. There was things that would happen to get to a conclusion. But
Do you? Yeah, no. Again, well said. Do you think that in the excitement of new development, which is obviously so robust down here and in other places as well, that developers and their consultants seem to follow existing examples of what should be done or what has been done successfully versus, well, maybe we should be looking at this a little bit differently. Do you see, kind of more of the same and the same? Oh, that works, so we're going to continue to do this. Yet nothing's the same in the world today. I mean, as a matter of fact, everything is upside down today.
yeah, and there's one of the reasons with what you were just asking is, we all draw on our experience. So if you had a couple of successful projects over the last 12, 13 years, I'm sorry, but if you follow the economics across the world, I'm not just talking about, I've got clients all over the world. Central banks in most countries have flooded their markets over the last dozen years, coming out of the financial crisis, with printed money. Well, that gives high net worth people a lot of money.
Mm.
because that's where the money ends up. So if you've done a couple projects over the last decade, you sold into a flush market, and you might have an opinion of how things should be that doesn't fit today's market.
Mm.
So there's one problem, I think, because we rely on our past knowledge. The other one is, and this is something I can't give you factual evidence on it, but I can give you a lot of anecdotal evidence that a lot of developers or sales organizations will script the presentation down so tightly out of fear of not having skilled salespeople.
Mm.
I have to overcome their inability to sell with a really tightly scripted approach. And the problem with that is then we're talking to deaf ears sometimes instead of to what people are wanting and what people are looking for.
So I want to kind of rewind the tape for a moment and kind of share with you, because it's very much in line with where this conversation is going. I created Dash as a
Yes.
platform exclusively for residential real estate agents and their on-site brokerage firms and residential developers. And no small part of the theme that I was experiencing doing marketing and branding for lots of them around the country was that what emerged was, instead of, you would imagine, a developer um, building, credible residences and their on-site brokerage firm kind of putting it all together and serving it up to real estate agents, that they would be working hand in glove with each other. It would be rather seamless process. And yet, from 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 where I sit, it has morphed into these folks working in silos,
Yes.
and this created this a fair degree of disharmony from one to another. And so what Dash did, goes about the business of doing, is to make available information directly from the developer that kind of goes through the Dash mill. It's put up in a very, very professional. Uh, uh, all the projects look the same in terms on the platform, so the information is purity of content is there. It's easy to access. It's up to date. We don't publish anything that the developers don't approve out front. So everybody can get it and kind of be on this level playing field. The point of all of this is that access to accurate and up to date information has been, or had been until Dash, in my opinion, so complicated, so confused. So, listen, there's obviously a reason that most people will not give you an enthusiastic approval of the real estate agent or the developer or the brokerage firm, that there's always a fair degree of criticism, and it really comes out of a lack of transparency. Why in God's name do you think that we've kind of gotten to this place today? Listen, in a matter of speaking, kind of Dash, I think, is going to be the antidote to all of it, because I believe in transparency, and I think that that's benefits everybody.
Yes.
And maybe in the end will help all of us feel better about the home, whether it's the first, second, or third we've bought, and that everybody said that what they said it was going to be, it was, instead of a whole host of stuff that just is not accurate.
Um, yes, yes, and yes. First of all, Len, as I told you when we first met, I think your solution is solving a major problem. I love what you've done there. As I told you, I did, as soon as you sent it to me, I did a little research before our first call. So I think you definitely have a solve for a lot of problems. I think what drives some of the silo effect is either ignorance, fears, or to some degree, people, again, I keep going back to markets. The markets have shifted. They've adjusted how high net worth people think. And they're like, oh, no, they've got plenty of money. I go, yeah, but other assets are being burdened by the change in the market. So it changes their mindset.
Mm.
So I think coming out of a flush market, I think also there's a desire on the part of salespeople, if they've got a hot product, to sell their hot product, to not be spreading it out. If I can sell out, I'll sell out. And I don't
Mm.
think they're bad people for feeling that way. I think it's human nature.
Yeah.
So what you're doing, I think, is leveling the playing field for the opportunity for anyone that has a client that has done what we're talking about here, done it right,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to make a value proposition to get them to the door for that on-site person, probably better pre-qualified for the product than ever before, if it's a good salesperson that's using Dash.
Sure.
And so I really love your product. And I think you do solve a lot of challenges. What I would, free advice for what that's worth is making sure that the developers understand the true uniqueness and power of it. It's not just exposure, for God's sakes. It goes way beyond exposure. And I really think that, like I told you when we first talked, I was excited about what you did because I think you've got something that is going to level the playing field and not only make others better, but make the on-site people better,
Yeah.
because I'm going to have to know my stuff, as you walk through the door. I mean, so I just love the product.
Yeah. No, thanks very much. So part of also this increased inefficiency that exists in our business, it can't entirely sit at the doorstep of Dropbox, which obviously is a very, very successful company.
Right.
However, that being said, it is so kind of a medieval platform for residential real estate sales. It's very complicated, and as I talk to so many agents and brokers, even developers will say it's become like the necessary evil of the business. And obviously, my response to that is nonsense. I mean, every tool has its purpose, and
Right.
the purpose of Dropbox is not for our business. But I want to kind of thanks for the vote of confidence.
Yes.
Genuinely appreciate it. Do you think that agents today are better, not as good, as motivated, not as motivated as if you wanted to go back 10 or 15 or 20 years? Do you see a different kind of individual
Yeah.
today in terms of how they approach our business?
Yeah. And not to, I don't want to generalize too much here, but I do believe that the level of professional selling skill is not at the same level as years ago. There's a lot of reasons behind that. The you brought up Dropbox and stuff. The other thing that I think we have to be aware of for where sales professionals, agents are today, is most technologies that, like Dropbox and paperless and that have been introduced to a real estate agent, have the agent as the hero of the story, not the consumer.
Yeah.
So all it's done is made their life easier, but made it harder for the consumer. I was in front of 100 and something agents last week, and they were talking about absentee. It was a destination place, absentee people, and I said, why don't you take your brochure and your information, label it 1, 2, 3, 4 with the way you would present it, put it in an overnight, schedule an appointment, and send an overnight. So when they open it up, they have something tangible to touch that required nothing on their part. And they look at me and they go, overnight? I go, and then schedule an appointment, we got all kinds of technology to be face to face.
Yeah.
And I had a handful of old time agents. I'm talking people, they were in their, I want to say it was 70s. I had this one couple was in their 80s that was doing high end stuff. They walked up and said, Dan, you just hit it on the head. We have lost the personal touch in how we go to the customer. We use all of our technologies to make our life easier and make them have to jump hoops. So when I look at, that's what I like about, the quality of the material that you'll put through Dash.
Yeah.
That can be utilized in such a great way. But I think the speed of the sale, the technology that's been unleashed on the industry, has allowed for a salesperson to not have to really go get all the levels of skills that we had to back in the day.
Yeah, so back in the day, it makes us kind of sound like old fogies, but I do remember an era where I think you even said at the top of the show that you spent your first year kind of learning the business, kind of learning, what to do and not to do and all the rest of it, which had to do with some degree of mentoring and process and all the rest of it. And I think regrettably, that just doesn't seem to be as important as it used to be. As a matter of fact, I hear with some degree of frequency more seasoned agents say that the degree of lack of knowledge of lots of general real estate agents really begins to undermine what even they do for a living, being terrific earners, because it continues to kind of foul the water of and a generalization, regrettably,
Right.
of they just don't know, or not doing their job, or could care less, or I mean, it's just like becoming trying to be an order taker in a business that, as we know, the barrier of entry is very low, but to do well is very, very high. But I don't know how, because this is what you do, or lots of what you do, is to get people to be more engaged, to kind of learn their business.
Right.
How how can they do that today when, regrettably, the larger brokerage firms um, uh, don't really have these mentoring programs to the degree that I remember they used to have?
Well, one thing I found out, Len, doing this as long as I have, is fortunately, um, instead of 7 of 10, it's like 1 in 20 that doesn't have the personal attributes and personal desires to be a professional. Almost everyone I run into who's struggling or doing poor at the job has the desire to be that high level professional. The problem is they didn't either engage in the right, trainings and opportunities to get there, or they're working in an organization that doesn't have that type of either expectation or requirement. So, but there's a lot of great organizations that because they're independent contractors, they go, we can't force them to come in here and do this. I go, I understand that, but at least you have it for the ones that want to be the pro. So I don't think that it's that we're stuck with a bunch of people that don't have the desire to produce at the level of professionalism at the highest level. I just think that, like you said, the barrier of entry is so low, and it's easy. Again, go back to habits coming out of the other market. You could take someone in 2021, the beginning of 2021, you could take someone that couldn't spell real estate, throw them in it, and they were on stage getting awards for $30 million of sales. And then 2022 came and 2023 came, and they can't pay their bills. They can't make enough to pay their car payment. And they look at me, they go, "What happened?" I said, "Well, you showed up when anyone could make money."
Mm.
And so you've allowed that to be the baseline for how you do real estate. There are so many professional things that have to be discovered for you to succeed, but that same opportunity exists today. So I still think that for our leaders out there, the problem is, how do I adapt my team to recognize that the skills that work no longer work, and now it's time to get other skills. So
Yeah.
I'm not I haven't thrown the industry out on, you know baby with the bathwater, because I've had enough conversations that I know there's desire to be there. Where we're missing is people slowing down enough to engage enough to go get the right trainings, the right stuff. Back to being on site, this is a beautiful opportunity for on site organizations to be very specific in the training. And I go back to what I said, having the conversation with the developer, having the interview be bilateral, moving into what the product is, how it's set up to be able to cover all the bases professionally in sales it's not rocket science. It can be done. I just think we've moved way too fast, and
Mm.
our expectations are out of line sometimes.
Um, Let me ask you, I want to pivot a little bit here. There were recent articles, George Perez and a handful of others, who talk about the near 12, 24, 36-month future for new developments down here in South Florida and beyond. What's your take on the appetite for these projects that will ultimately become go projects, or maybe not?
I'm my crystal ball. Like I said, I'm a part-time economist. I always tell people I do it in my spare time. I've been looking at it for a long time, and I've actually got some steak dinners out there, Len, that the second half of next year is going to be very, very good. And I'm
Mm,
talking about good like back in the day when I had my company in the 90s. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be good.
mm,
And I think that the temperament of the monetary policies that are coming forward, as far as the way the Fed's looking at things, I think it's going to even have high net worth people going, I can let go of some things again.
Uh,
So I'm thinking any company that's not positioning themselves right now in the first quarter, second quarter of next year to be ready for it will miss the boat. So I truly believe that these projects will do fine going into the second quarter, but I think the opportunity to really have an accelerated approach to some of these projects will be the second half of next year, just because I think everything's going to line up.
I hope I'll keep my fingers crossed. Along with
Uh,
along with you. I try to ask and get back from our guests a little bit of a something, not necessarily naming names, but one of the crazier kind of situations you found yourself maybe over the last 10 years that you can share with the audience, whether it be goofy, funny, outrageous, notorious, whatever. Can you offer up some?
I can share a couple ones with you
Please,
because
please.
I built for 13 years, as I said. So I turned around and said to my wife, I go, let's build a house. And she was like, really? I go, yeah. I said, you were the interior designer
Yeah.
for us. I'm the GC. Let's put the old team back together and build our. We never built our house. And she's like, okay. Doing that, Len, I had to go back and engage the marketplace.
Mm.
I'm going to give you a story that will blow your mind. I won't say person's names, but so here I'm the general contractor. My wife was our design consultant. She has an interior design degree. She came to me and said, can I get now, my wife doesn't have to ask permission to do anything. I want that to be clear to all the audience. But she
Yeah.
asked me, she goes, are you okay if I hire a interior designer to kind of be a consultant with me? And so I asked her, I said, why would you do that? She goes, it's just our house. She goes, I want a second opinion. I'm having a little bit of nerves about it. I said, sure. So she asked if I could ask around the guys I know, who are they using? I get her somebody who was touted to me to be the best. And so I give her the number. My wife reaches out to her. She calls my wife. Now, this is what I think has happened across all industries. Here's how the conversation went. Within the first 2 minutes of the conversation, the woman said to my wife, trying to validate herself and build her value, she said to her, well, the first thing I want to share with you is you need to be very careful with how you engage your builder. They're going to try to do some things to you that you really got to be careful. And that's why you have me. And then she said, and by the way, all these builders have an interior person. Stay away from that person. In the first 2 minutes, she disparaged me and my wife because she was so worried about validating herself that she didn't take the time to learn.
That takes
And
talent.
that is so indicative of everywhere I go, whether it was working with my suppliers, working with, you know, uh, anybody. And
Mm.
so I think the crazy dangers out there right now is that we went from moving at the speed of light to now we have to do it right. And I just don't think it's sunk in yet.
Yeah.
And the fears and insecurities in salespeople and developers and in owners to make sure that we're validated and that we're going to put it together the perfect way. We just miss all of those soft skills that are so necessary for success.
I think that's well said as well. Um, I'm going to wrap it up. I want to ask you a question, and I've kind of asked a handful of our other guests. So it's said that life is not about what has happened to you; it's about how you respond to what's happened to you. So, can you share with us, Dan, a moment and/or situation that really wound up having you reflect in a whole different way in terms of a response to something that did occur?
Yeah, I'm for the sake of protecting myself, I'll give you a scenario.
Sure.
I am like everyone else. I have my own triggers. I have my own responses, and in a engagement with a company, something occurred that I immediately assumed was um, purposefully done to do, I would say, to do harm to us. To do something to us that we didn't like at our company. And instead of me being using my skills, I lashed out. And in the lashing out, fortunately, this person was gracious enough for us to have a good conversation, for me to discover it was a misinterpretation. It was not in any way purposeful. So I I find that I can also, although teach it and coach it to people, I can find myself making reactions, having reactive behavior that gets me in trouble or creates headwinds that I don't need. And one of the things that I should turn to, since I had my real estate company all those years ago, my father was a CEO, international CEO. He gave me a 3x5 card with his 6 laws or 7 laws that he lived with. And he said, study this, which of course I was a kid. I did. And I threw it in my desk drawer. And one day, whenever I was stressing out, he goes, have you ever looked at the card? And what it is it's a set of laws, not suggestions, laws about behavior and how you act and what you do. And through the years, I took his, changed some, kept some, and added some. And I have my 10 laws I live by.
Mm.
And so the offset to what you just asked me is if I will pause and think of my laws, I never get in trouble because I react properly.
Yeah.
But if I react from that emotion or that response to what just happened to me, I find myself digging holes that I got to spend a lot of time getting out of.
Yeah, that's the truth. Hey, Dan, I just want to thank you again for your time. I know you're a busy executive traveling all around the United States, sharing your experiences, which I'm sure everybody does genuinely appreciate and benefits from. So have a great day. Safe travels. Thank you again so much for your time today.
Len, it was an honor, and reach out if I can ever be of help, my friend.
I'll look forward to it.